Plugin of the week is the Softube Summit TLA-100A. Another mouthful, but a really cool plugin. This plugin emulates a piece of equipment created by Summit Audio, which was founded in 1979. It was founded by Michael Papp. And together with another somewhat famous person, David Hill from Crane Song, he actually they worked together to create a limiter plugin or a leveling amplifier that somewhat emulates the characteristics of an optical compressor, although it isn't. And they're very cagey about that. They don't really, in any of their documentation, give you any kind of indication of how they create the compression. They tell you it's a tube leveling amplifier. Meaning that there is a tube circuit, there is some form of compression circuit unknown, and there's a 990 op amp at the output stage. Now, what's really cool about this that differs from like a standard sort of LA-2A type of plugin, which is something that you would classically put like on a bass or maybe on a vocal or something like that to create some openness. What this does is it actually has settings for the attack. Right? So you have fast attack, a medium attack, and a slow attack. You have fast release, medium release, and a slow release. And when you work with the different settings here, to some degree, like an optical compressor, there's some program-dependent tendencies that occur with the release characteristic. So one of the things that's kind of cool about optical components is that it responds dynamically to the program material. So if the program material is more sustained, or if there's a certain amount of gain reduction, like a lot of it, it'll be very slow on the release. If it's more transient and shorter, then the release will be quicker. And if there's less, gain reduction, then it will release more rapidly. But if you get a really rapid peak, it will take longer to recover. So there are some things here which are kind of cool. And part of that is to prevent pumping and breathing. And most of this is just the general characteristics of optical components. So this device actually takes on a lot of those characteristics. It's really simple in design. You have your attack and release settings, okay, which is very unique. You have the gain, which is an output gain. So very much like the LA-2A, which has the gain control on the left and the peak reduction or gain reduction, right, on the right. It's exactly laid out the same way. Softube also added in some additional characteristics which are not part of the original device. So I've worked on this with this hardware device many times. This hardware device came out in the 80s. I think technically it was like their first device that came out. So they formed the company. I'm not sure if it was out in 79, but a lot of studios had this, and I loved using this on bass, loved using it on vocal. It works on guitars as well. So I'm going to do a little demonstration that kind of shows you some of that. But there's a couple of ways that things that Softube added in which kind of make it really cool. One is there's an input filter, a low cut filter, which can be applied actually to the input signal, right? So it's a filter, just a high pass filter, or to the detector, what they call the detector signal. And what that means is that if you put a filter, it's filtering the side chain, what keys the compression. So if you have something like a bass where the low end is over triggering the compression and making it work too slow, then you can flip it over to here, filter off some of the sub frequencies or low frequencies that are over triggering it, and then you can get it to react a little bit more musically. So depending upon what the situation is with the bass, if the bass actually maybe is over transient or the attack is too accentuated, it might be better to do it the other way and let more of the low frequencies push some of the compression to even out the attacks. You kind of figure that out. There's also a saturation control. Now, what this does is it sort of overdrives the tube saturation for the tube circuitry that's prior to whatever the gain reduction circuit is. The tubes, it's not a Varamute compressor. For all I know, I don't believe it's a VCA compressor. It certainly doesn't sound like one. If you just listen to it and work with it, you think, oh, that's an optical compressor. And in fact, until I really read the documentation on it, I always thought it was an optical compressor because that's exactly the program-dependent release characteristics that you would get from that. So there's a saturation control, which actually can help to tame transient peaks. So I'm going to show you in a little bit. You could also operate it in a parallel configuration. And what this means is that you have wet-dry controls. So let's kind of trim this down a little bit here to our mix. I'm going to solo up a bass, and let's have a listen to what this would sound like just on a bass. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by bringing up the peak reduction. And I have to decide what I want to do. If I go to like a slow attack, then the slow attack time is like around 100 milliseconds. So on its fast setting, it's less than a millisecond, and medium obviously is somewhere in between. And then I can change this. Like, so for example, if I wanted to smooth out the bass sound, I could switch this to the slow setting. And this gives me a smoother sound. And with the detector here, with the low cut filter, I can kind of... So if this were on the input, you could hear it cutting away the low frequencies. And that kind of gets it to react nice and kind of smoothly, a little bit more like an optical compressor would. So this acts sort of like a limiter. And you could still hear, like, even though it's doing that, like, it's giving like a nice warmth and smoothness and openness to the sound. So let's kind of find our way back here to the intro. Now if I switch to a medium attack, I can get this. I think I smoothed it out a little bit too much. So I can get this to be a little bit more open with a slower attack, medium attack, and a faster release. And this is kind of cool. So now I can use the saturation control here, like so just so you could hear it, to tame a little bit or warm up some of the transients. It doesn't need a lot. Right, so there's kind of like a nice, you know, start to this. I can also hear, if I wanted to do the same things, I'll just kind of go right over here to Softube. That's probably the easiest way to grab it, and I could do this like a parallel type of thing here with the drums, and so where I can get it to like maybe a fast attack. Let's just kind of see what kind of like a medium release. Just kind of go with this, and let's get some. So I'm purposefully kind of overdriving this here. I'm going to leave this out because I want the low end to kind of push this a bit as well. And then, so what I'm going to do with this is now I'm going to swing it open here, and then I'm going to mix in some of this as a side chain. This will help to add some solidity and some smoothness to the drum. So let's check it out. You can really hear what it does to the snap of the snare. And it adds like a little bit of a nice depth to the drums. I think I'm going to go with a slow release. I think just to kind of limit a little bit. It's not like a real pumping and breathing kind of song. And mix in just enough to give it a little bit of solidity. Also warms up the drum sound there a little bit. All right, so let's move on. A couple other things that are this is really good with are on guitars. So if I go ahead here and throw a pair of these guys on here real quick, kind of get a sense for what that is. Hold on, it's like I can't talk and select a plugin at the same time. Passed by it. Everybody's probably like, hey, it's right there, you passed it. So let's kind of put in the acoustics. This is like really well suited for acoustics, like because here with the gain reduction circuit, with the sidechain circuit, I'm gonna start with a medium. Medium attack and a fast release. Actually, I kind of like that slow release. Let's see what that sounds like. So you can really hear like the presence. I'm gonna. Maybe I'll go the opposite way and not saturate it. So you hear the clarity that it brings and the definition that it kind of brings in there. And I'm just going to copy these settings over to the... This I'm going to saturate a little bit more. So here with a medium release setting, I can kind of get it to kind of pump a little bit more. All right, so let's go back to the beginning. So this is bass overheads on the two guitars. So you can hear how those different elements just pop right out. Okay, and one last one, and then we'll wrap it up for this demo. And so this will just be on the vocal, because this is like a classic place where you would want to use something like this. And sometimes too much of a good thing here is not always great. Like using the same thing in all the places. So let's skip right over to the verse.
There's music in your voice.
So let's kind of bring in
a song so soft and sweet that I had no choice, my love. I'm praying for a whisper in my
you really hear
ear,
the body that's
just
brought
the
in there.
sound to make it clear. So I'm sitting here waiting by the phone. Talk to me, baby, I don't want to be wrong. Talk to me, baby. What's the use in taking so
I'm gonna
long?
filter this.
I will be waiting for you to come on home. So talk to me, baby. Tell me that I'm not alone. My heart is open wide.
bit extra gain there.
I'm laying my desire just for you, and I know you love me too.
So you get a sense here of what it does just on those individual tracks and how it really brings it out.
There's music in your voice, a song so soft and sweet that I had no choice, my love.
Also adds a nice body and richness as well as a presence to the vocal.
Just the sound to make it clear. So I'm sitting here waiting by the phone. Talk to me, baby, I don't wanna be wrong.
So really, really great compressor. I mean, just the way I remember it in terms of working with the hardware and the ways that I want to use it. There wasn't usually more than one or two in any given studio, so I didn't have the luxury of putting it on as many instruments as here, but you could just get a sense of how this compressor can work in a variety of different scenarios. Bass, guitars, drums in the overheads. Also would work on rooms if you really wanted to squash it and have the parallel thing, and on vocals. Also works on backgrounds. Really flexible compressor with these attack and release characteristics. You can really create a lot of coloration or control, have a lot of control over what it is that you're working with. And the saturation control is really sweet because it does allow you to add a warmth or richness or tone down transient peaks that are a little bit too harsh. Really good one. Softube tube leveling amplifier, TLA-100A by Summit Audio.